They called it impossible. Even the Germans, masters of precision, laughed when they heard it. 50,000 planes? In a single year? No nation could build that many, not even in their wildest dreams. But somewhere across the Atlantic, the sky began to change. In Detroit, Los Angeles, and Seattle, the sound of engines replaced silence. Women traded aprons for overalls. Car factories became aircraft cities. Every hour, another bomber rolled out. Every sunrise, the horizon shimmered with silver wings. German pilots who once owned the skies looked up, and saw the impossible flying toward them. Not dozens. Not hundreds. But thousands. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. America had done what no empire had ever done before. It turned industry into a weapon. And the sky itself became a battlefield built on steel, sweat, and belief. In the early 1940s, the United States faced a terrifying question: how could a nation still recovering from the Great Depression fight two wars on opposite sides of the world? Germany's factories had been preparing for years, Japan's armies were already conquering across Asia, and Britain was barely hanging on. America, meanwhile, had no great military machine, just ordinary citizens and idle assembly lines. But when war came, something extraordinary happened. America didn't just rise to the challenge, it outbuilt the world. Factories that once made cars, refrigerators, and bicycles began producing bombers, fighters, and engines by the hour. Ford's Willow Run plant rolled out AB-24 every 60 minutes. Boeing's hangars in Seattle stretched for miles. Women filled the workshops, riveters with steel in their hands and fire in their hearts. To the Germans, it was unthinkable. To the Americans, it became destiny. The world had seen empires forged by conquest, but never by production. This is the story of how the United States turned its factories into fortresses, and how a nation of workers built the sky that won the war. Before the bombs fell on Pearl Harbor, America was a nation at peace, divided, uncertain, and still limping from the wounds of the Great Depression. The idea of joining another world war was unthinkable to most. Factories were quiet, assembly lines slow, and the U.S. Army Air Corps possessed fewer than 2,000 combat aircraft, most of them outdated. Across the ocean, the Axis powers laughed at the notion that America could ever be a threat. Germany's Luftwaffe, polished and proven in the skies over Europe, believed that no industrial miracle could match years of German engineering and discipline. Hitler himself dismissed American potential, calling the nation a land of playboys and mechanics. But within those very mechanics lay a hidden strength, a potential no dictator could measure. The American workforce wasn't built for war, but it was built for production. The same innovation that had created the automobile, the assembly line, and the skyscraper now faced its ultimate test. When Roosevelt delivered his call for the arsenal of democracy, it wasn't just a speech, it was a spark. Factories that had been silent roared back to life. Every toolmaker, every welder, every factory hand understood the challenge: build faster, stronger, and more than anyone ever had. The dream was staggering: 50,000 aircraft a year. No blueprint existed for such madness. Engineers laughed, economists panicked, and generals doubted it could even be organized. But America didn't need belief, it needed momentum. And momentum it found. Contracts were signed overnight. Car plants were stripped and redesigned. Steel shipments tripled. Across the nation, the rhythm of industry began to echo like a distant drumbeat, one that would soon become the heartbeat of war itself. This wasn't just about numbers, it was about identity. Every rivet hammered, every engine tested, every bomber rolled out was an act of defiance. The United States wasn't just preparing for war, it was reinventing itself. By 1942, the impossible no longer sounded absurd. The once skeptical executives of Ford, Boeing, and Lockheed were now competing to see who could produce more, faster, better. The challenge had become personal. And for every German pilot who believed America couldn't fill the skies, the answer was already being built, one aircraft at a time. What began as a dream of 50,000 planes soon became something greater, a movement powered not by military might, but by the hands of ordinary Americans who refused to fail. The factories were waking up, and soon, the entire world would hear them. By 1942, America was no longer asking if it could build 50,000 planes, it was asking how fast it could do it. From coast to coast, the nation transformed itself into something the world had never seen before, a living, breathing engine of war. Cities became blueprints. Farmlands turned into airfields. And the heartbeat of America began to echo through the massive hangars of steel and smoke. At the center of this industrial revolution stood Willow Run, Ford's greatest gamble. Henry Ford's engineers promised to build one bomber every hour, something so absurd that even military officials laughed. But Ford wasn't laughing. He poured his fortune, his pride, and his legendary assembly line genius into a single vision, mass-producing warplanes like Model TS. Willow Run became the largest factory under one roof on Earth. A building so vast that weather patterns formed inside it. The factory floor stretched more than a mile long. By the end of 1943, over 40,000 workers, men and women, marched in daily, building the B-24 Liberator, one of the deadliest bombers of the war. They called it the Flying Boxcar. The Germans called it the Sky Train. But to those who built it, it was a symbol of something far more powerful, American resolve. For the first time, women stepped into roles once thought impossible. Rosie the Riveter became more than a poster, she became a reality. Housewives, teachers, farmers' daughters, they rolled up their sleeves, tied their hair in bandanas, and learned to weld aluminum wings under the roar of machinery. The same hands that once rocked cradles were now riveting armor plates that would cross oceans. Factories didn't sleep. 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week, night and day blurred into one. Spotlights burned through the smoke as trains delivered steel, rubber, and engines without pause. Every part of America, from the cotton fields of the South to the shipyards of California, was connected in one massive web of purpose. And this wasn't just Ford. Boeing in Seattle turned its plant into a kingdom of bombers. Lockheed in Burbank built fighters so quickly that engineers barely had time to test them before the next one rolled off the line. Douglas Aircraft in California built entire, shadow factories, hidden beneath camouflage to protect them from imagined bombers. Each company was part of a nationwide orchestra, and the music they played was thunder. In 1 year alone, America built more aircraft than Germany had built in the entire war up to that point. The Luftwaffe couldn't comprehend it. Reports from German intelligence were dismissed as exaggerations, even propaganda. How could a single nation, thousands of miles away, produce this flood of steel and wings? But it was happening. Every sunrise, another 100 planes took flight. Every sunset, another 100 were already on the assembly line. From farmers in Iowa to machinists in Detroit, from secretaries in Washington to welders in California, the nation had become one colossal, Sky Factory. America wasn't just building airplanes anymore. It was building momentum, unity, and destiny. Each rivet was a promise. Each engine, a declaration. And somewhere above the clouds, that promise was already taking shape, silver wings glinting in the sun, carrying the weight of a nation that refused to surrender. The world had never seen power like this before. And soon, neither would the Luftwaffe. When the first waves of American bombers appeared over Europe, the German High Command dismissed them as a temporary nuisance. The Luftwaffe still ruled the skies, or so they believed. But as the months rolled on, German pilots began to notice something deeply unsettling. No matter how many bombers they shot down, more kept coming. At first, they assumed it was deception, propaganda designed to intimidate them. But the evidence was undeniable. From the French coast to the heart of Germany, the contrails stretched across the heavens like scars. The B-17 flying fortresses and B-24 liberators came in endless formations, hundreds, then thousands, blotting out the sun. To the men on the ground, it was as if the sky itself had turned American. In early 1943, when German intelligence intercepted data suggesting the U.S. had produced over 45,000 aircraft in a single year, disbelief spread through the Reich's industrial circles. Engineers in Berlin recalculated the figures, convinced there had been an error. "No nation," one Luftwaffe officer wrote, "can replace machines faster than we can destroy them." But America could, and it did. Pilots returning from missions over the Channel reported seeing new bomber models that hadn't even been identified in intelligence reports yet. The enemy wasn't just building replacements, they were innovating mid-war. For German industry, this was a nightmare unfolding in real time. Factories in Bremen, Hamburg, and Essen were already strained under constant Allied bombardment. Aluminum was scarce, oil even scarcer. Every plane lost by Germany was a wound that could take weeks, sometimes months, to heal. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, America treated losses like statistics. 100 bombers gone? Build 100 more. Every crash site over Europe only fueled the American production lines back home. The factories in Detroit and Seattle weren't mourning, they were roaring. The psychological toll on German pilots was devastating. Veterans of the Battle of Britain who once fought in small, controlled dogfights now faced flying fortresses that came in waves too vast to count. Each bomber carried 10 men, each formation hundreds of guns. They were escorted by swarms of P-47 Thunderbolts and P-51 Mustangs, fast, unrelenting guardians that made every interception a suicide run. "I saw the same insignia on bombers 2 days in a row," one German ace recalled. "I thought it was impossible, until I realized they had already replaced the entire squadron." Even the Nazi propaganda ministry struggled to explain it. Joseph Goebbels privately called the American production machine the enemy's true superweapon. In his diaries, he wrote that the Reich could outfight the Allies in courage, but never in capacity. By 1944, the Luftwaffe was a shadow of its former self. Its aces were dead, its fuel tanks dry, and its factories shattered. But still, the bombers came, each one a flying symbol of industrial defiance. In the skies above Germany, soldiers who once sneered at American industry now watched in silence as the horizon darkened under thousands of engines. It was no longer just a battle for air superiority. It was a war of endurance, and America had built an army that could fly forever. The Germans had seen many enemies before. But never an enemy that could build faster than it could bleed. By 1944, the United States had done something no military strategist in Europe had ever imagined possible. It had transformed production into a weapon more powerful than any gun, bomb, or army. The war was no longer decided only by courage on the battlefield, it was decided by the speed of the assembly line, by the rhythm of machines that never slept, and by a nation that turned industry into warfare. Every rivet, every gear, every drop of oil became a bullet in the arsenal of democracy. Factories weren't just building planes, they were building time. Time for Britain to recover. Time for the Soviet Union to push west. Time for the Allies to overwhelm the Axis with sheer, unrelenting force. At Willow Run, one B-24 Liberator rolled off the line every 55 minutes. At Boeing, new B-17s filled the runways faster than pilots could be trained to fly them. Even the smallest town workshops, with a handful of machinists, became part of something vast and unstoppable. This was the true genius of America's war effort, decentralization. No single factory controlled production. Instead, thousands of companies, big and small, were united by purpose. Car manufacturers built engines. Toy companies molded aircraft parts. Typewriter firms designed gun triggers. The entire economy bent toward one goal, victory. For every plane that took flight, an invisible army stood behind it, miners digging ore in Pennsylvania, rail workers hauling steel to Detroit, women assembling wings in California, sailors loading crates in New York. It was a living chain, stretching from the heartland to the front lines, where every link mattered. And this chain had no weak point. If one factory went dark, another lit up. If one plant fell behind, two more accelerated. The system was alive, flexible, self-correcting, unbreakable. The Germans couldn't understand it. Their production was centralized, fragile, bound by rigid control and political fear. A single bombing raid could cripple an entire weapons network. In America, even total destruction of one site meant nothing, because 10 others were already filling the gap. Industrial might had become a psychological weapon. German soldiers began to whisper that the Americans had factories in the clouds. Each time they looked up and saw another squadron of bombers, it felt as though the sky itself had been mass-produced. And perhaps, in a way, it had. Because the power of production wasn't just about machinery, it was about belief. The belief that ordinary people, united under one cause, could outbuild tyranny. That speed and scale could defeat brutality and fear. By the end of 1944, America's output had shattered every record in history. It had built more planes than all Axis nations combined. But even more powerful than its machines, was its momentum. A force that no bomb could stop, no propaganda could weaken, and no army could outlast. This was the moment when the United States proved that wars could be won not just by destroying, but by creating. When the final echoes of war faded in 1945, the world looked to the skies, and saw what America had built. The bombers that once rumbled through thunderclouds now stood silent, their wings glinting in the post-war sun. Factories that had run without rest for 4 relentless years finally fell quiet. But their legacy did not end with the surrender of Germany or Japan. It lived on in every rivet, every blueprint, every mind that dared to believe the impossible. The United States had not merely produced weapons, it had produced a new kind of strength. In a world shattered by destruction, America had proven that its greatest weapon was not the atom bomb or the battleship, it was the ability to build. The generation that manned the assembly lines became legends in their own right. They were the unseen soldiers, the welders, riveters, mechanics, and engineers whose sweat and precision powered freedom. Their names were never printed in headlines, yet without them, no pilot would have flown, no mission would have succeeded, no victory would have been won. The German soldiers who once mocked America's factories came to respect, even fear, their scale. Prisoners of war, after capture, would ask to see the factories for themselves, convinced the numbers were exaggerated. But when they saw Willow Run, Boeing Field, and the endless convoys of B-24s and B-17s rolling into the horizon, disbelief turned into awe. The Sky Factory had done more than fill the air with metal, it had filled the world with hope. In the ashes of global war, America's production lines transformed into the foundation of a new era, the era of aviation, innovation, and technological dominance. The same factories that once built bombers would soon build passenger planes. The same hands that riveted wings would one day assemble rockets. The Industrial Revolution born from necessity had evolved into the very force that would take humanity beyond the clouds. The war had ended. The skies were clear again. But the echo of those engines, the thunder of American creation, would never fade. Because in World War II, America didn't just build machines. It built the future. By the end of World War II, the world had witnessed many miracles of courage, but none quite like the one that took place inside America's factories. No empire in history had ever created so much, so fast, for so long. From the hum of Detroit to the thunder of Seattle, every machine, every worker, and every spark of light helped turn the tide of the greatest war ever fought. For the men who flew those planes, each mission was a test of survival. But for those who built them, it was a test of faith, faith that every rivet mattered, that every engine counted, and that their unseen battle on the assembly line was just as vital as the one in the sky. When German soldiers finally looked up and saw thousands of bombers soaring above them, they weren't just seeing machines, they were seeing belief made visible. The United States didn't conquer through destruction alone. It conquered through creation, through unity, innovation, and unbreakable will. And long after the last plane landed, one truth remained in the echo of every engine. America didn't just build aircraft during World War II. It built the very sky itself.